Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, August the 4th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. Our guest in this segment is Will Smith. Will's been on the show a number of times, and we always talk about consciousness. So, Will, let's do it again. Take it away.
Well, thank you for inviting me back on the show, and I wanted to back off a little bit and just, because I've been on the show, and a lot of people ask me, I really don't understand about consciousness yet. So I wanted to just back off and talk about that. So rather than try to really define it, though, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Like, one of the things that's really easy to see is a change in consciousness. So this week we had the news about Cecil the lion, which just took over in some places. People were very upset about Cecil the lion, and so that jogged something in my memory back from the early part of the 20th century when Teddy Roosevelt was president, and I knew he was a big game hunter. So I looked him up in Wikipedia and read some articles about what he actually did. And he and his son, after he was president, went over and bagged 500 animals in Africa in 1909. And it was pointed out in the article that this wasn't really that big a deal because some hunters were doing 1,000 a year of big game. And so back at that time, people could go kill 1,000 lions a year and wouldn't really raise an eyebrow. So in 100 years, if you look at where we've come now, one lion getting killed in Africa can get the whole world talking about it. So that's a huge
change in consciousness. Yeah, that's right.
So, and then the other thing that I wanted to bring up about just, the general conversation is I found on YouTube that Joesph Campbell talked with Bill Moyers back in the late 80s about myth. And there's a whole series of 6 interviews, they're an hour long each, that were done in 1986, 1987, and they're available on YouTube. You can watch them for free. And it's called The Power of Myth, and he talks a lot about that, and you and I talked just a little bit about that. And I think this guy really has some great insights for us that we need to listen to nowadays. And the first thing that he brings out, one of the first things that he brings out is that the old way, if you look at humanity as a continuous history, and you try to give some value to all of our understanding of what's going on this planet, that putting our consciousness here in our head is a relatively new idea, a new concept. For most ancients, cognition was just a function of consciousness. It wasn't the end all and be. It wasn't where consciousness was located. Now our science says, I think, therefore I am, which sort of implies if you're not thinking, you aren't, which is not the way people used to think. They used to think that your consciousness was either in your body or maybe in your heart. The Egyptians thought it was in your heart, and that the brain was just like a sense organ more than anything else, and that it was subjugated to the heart. And I think we can see that in our culture, that we have gotten to that point where there's little heart in our consciousness. It's mostly thinking. But and so we make decisions as if somebody who's the leader of a country has to make the tough decisions, and they have to say, well, these people over here are bad, kill them. And so that's what they do. They just sort of steel themselves and kill them. And one of the things that Joesph Campbell brings out, I think it's Schopenhauer, I'm not really a philosophy major or anything, but Schopenhauer pointed out that people have this instantaneous split-second decision. If some other person is in danger and they can save their lives, sometimes they put themselves in great danger. And his idea was that at this point, there's this split-second realization that I am you and you are me. And so the person puts themselves in great danger to save someone else. And that's a pretty interesting concept, because that's not how we think from an evolutionary standpoint.
What impact does it have when our consciousness moves from our body into our brain or mind? Because I know in my own life, I always think I spend too much time with my brain racing around,
Exactly.
going nowhere, thinking just whatever it wants to think. But I'd rather be more in my body, and maybe some people are. I don't know where other people are, but I know where I am.
Well, that's the idea behind meditation, is that you learn to quiet your mind voluntarily so that you can consciously lower your hamster wheel. Stop it from turning so fast. And
I can't even imagine what it feels like to have your consciousness
well, you
in
can
your
go
body.
take a ride in the flotation tank and find that out. But anyway, I think that you're bringing out one of the things is that it's just in the milieu, the where we are right now in our society. It's hard for us to imagine that. So I want to make a kind of just put out a concept, and I'm not asking anybody to try to change. I don't want to change anybody's mind. I just want to sort of give a different viewpoint. Sometimes by putting on an example of this, if you've ever gone skiing and you're in a time when the sun has gone behind a cloud, you can't see where the moguls are, where the humps are, until you put on yellow goggles, and then you can just see everything really clearly. So what I'm going to suggest is that we can put a filter on sometimes to take a look at what's going on. Because, see, the world has to make sense to me. So I want to back off. I want to go up to a high altitude, because I don't think we can decide what we can do until we know where we are and where we're going. So I want to call where we're going reality 2.0. And I'm not saying that I know where it is, but I'm saying that maybe we can get an idea of it. So when I say reality 2.0, that really just indicates that we're going through a shift in consciousness right now. And Joesph Campbell points out that our myths are fading away. People in a normal society, everybody knows the common myths, but now they're sort of fading away. And these serve as a kind of a library that let us talk about things that are not in the material world. They're in the non-material world, but they let us bring these things into our consciousness. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that we're so used to dealing with consensus reality, which is the average of what's going on. It's not the specific thing. But if you think about, again, on the last show I talked about the waterfall, using the waterfall as an image for where we are. And in our normal life, if you look at where we've been over the past 1,000 years, most of the time we're just sort of going along, floating down the river. And then at some point we go over a waterfall, and then at some point when things are really going crazy, we're down in the pool down at the bottom, and we're all getting jerked around and bashed around. But if you look at that, that's really just an illusion. That's really not what's so in that picture. What's really so is each little drop of water is having a different experience, just like us. So we can look at Canada, we can say, look what's going on in Victoria. We can look in the newspaper and say, look what's going on in Victoria. But that's not the real story. Just as in that waterfall, there's one drop that went over the waterfall and it went straight down to the bottom, and it's hugging the bottom, and it just came out and it went down the stream. And it says, what's everybody talking about? I didn't notice anything that was that crazy. I'm fine. But there's some other drop who went over, and he got kicked up in the air and smashed on a rock and swallowed by a fish. Well, his story coming out of what just happened, is going to be a whole lot different. So this is what we're talking about. This is another facet of reality 2.0, is that we're going to be able to focus more, not so much on what everybody sees, but on what each individual person sees. So I just want to just get those things kind of. How do these things sit?
Well, you mentioned a few days ago that the thing of Joesph Campbell,
yeah.
And he said the old myths are gone, and I didn't understand what that meant until you explained it to me. But you gave an example of a myth and how important the myth was to the way we see the world. Can you?
Well, an example of that would be, let's just take Bible stories, because we live in a a Judeo-Christian society. And so maybe 50 years ago, not everybody was really into those religions, but they still knew the stories. They still knew the Bible stories. If you read something like, I don't know, you read books that were popular back then, you'll see a lot of references to Bible stories, and you'll just see fewer and fewer references to those stories now. I mean, you still, the big stories like Adam and Eve or the flood, but they're, you know, they're just not talked about. We don't have the stories that we used to have.
So, but in my daily life, when you have to make a decision, maybe a moral decision, it's those stories we know or we think we know that allow us to make a decision. And if we don't know the story, the myth, we don't know what to do.
Well, Campbell's main point is that they inform us about things that are higher than just the material realm. So if you just look at the world around us in an evolutionary perspective, it makes absolute sense. This guy needs to be killed because there are just too many of these people like this, so kill him. So there are always going to be some people who are willing to do that because that's okay with them. And those guys right now in our system are going to float to the top. Now, that's not the way we can create a new system, though, because we don't know what's coming. We know that those guys aren't going to be there forever, however. So that's all I want to do. I just want to back off. I think it's very important to act at a local level to do things positively, but I just, you know, looking at the very top level of what's going on in the world, we don't have much to do. There are not many choices left.
And we're going to have to end it like at that point until the next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Will. And thanks for watching today's Citizens Forum.